Tuesday mornings in the Morrison household were about as exciting as watching paint dry on a particularly humid day. Which is to say, not at all. But if you asked 8-year-old Tommy Morrison, he'd tell you that Tuesday was the absolute worst day of the week because nothing interesting ever happened on Tuesdays. No aliens landed on Tuesdays, no interdimensional portals opened in the backyard on Tuesdays, and definitely no cosmic adventures began on Tuesdays. Tommy had very strong opinions about aliens, you see. He was absolutely 100% convinced that they existed, and he spent most of his free time scanning the skies with his plastic telescope, waiting for his big moment. His parents, Jake and Lisa Morrison, had long ago given up trying to convince him that maybe, just maybe, he should focus on more earthly concerns, like homework, or not putting cereal in his sister's dollhouse. "Tommy, eat your breakfast," Lisa called from the kitchen, where she was performing the daily miracle of getting a family of 4 fed, dressed, and out the door before 8 a.m. She was the kind of mom who could pack lunch, sign permission slips, and negotiate a cereal hostage situation all while drinking coffee that had gone cold approximately 20 minutes ago. "But Mom, I'm monitoring the atmospheric conditions," Tommy replied, pressing his face against the dining room window. "The ionosphere is particularly active today, perfect for alien spacecraft." Jake Morrison looked up from his newspaper with the expression of a man who had long ago accepted that his son might be part golden retriever, part NASA mission control specialist. "Son, the only thing monitoring atmospheric conditions around here is the weather app on my phone, and it says it's going to rain." "That's exactly what they want you to think, Dad." Now, while this riveting conversation about meteorology and extraterrestrial life was happening, there was another member of the Morrison family who was, in fact, quite aware of the atmospheric conditions, and the ionosphere, and the small, cloaked spacecraft that had been orbiting Earth for the past 3 days, running what could only be described as reconnaissance missions. Mr. Whiskers, the family's orange tabby cat, was sitting on the windowsill with the sort of casual alertness that most people associated with security guards or very paranoid squirrels. To the Morrison family, he was just their slightly overweight, slightly judgmental pet who had strong opinions about the quality of his food and the temperature of his favorite sleeping spots. But Mr. Whiskers was watching that spacecraft with the kind of professional interest that would have made NASA very, very concerned. "Look at Mr. Whiskers," Tommy said, pointing at the cat. "He's totally scanning for alien activity too. Animals can sense these things, you know." Lisa glanced over at the cat, who was indeed staring intently out the window, his tail twitching in a way that suggested he was either plotting something or calculating trajectory angles. Probably plotting something, she figured. It was Mr. Whiskers, after all. "Honey, the cat is probably just watching birds," she said, grabbing her purse and Jake's forgotten lunch from the counter. "You know how he gets when the neighbors put out bird seed." What Lisa didn't know was that Mr. Whiskers hadn't cared about birds for approximately 7 years. What Mr. Whiskers cared about was the fact that someone up there was running scans on his adopted family, and he was starting to take it personally. The cat's ears twitched as he picked up a transmission frequency that no human technology could detect. His eyes narrowed as he translated the clicking, whistling language that was discussing specimen acquisition and minimal resistance expected. Mr. Whiskers made a sound that the Morrison family had always assumed was purring. It wasn't purring. It was the intergalactic equivalent of cracking your knuckles. Commander Vex of the Zephian Empire was having what he considered to be an excellent day. He'd successfully infiltrated 17 different star systems, collected specimens from 12 different species, and hadn't even had to use his disintegration ray once. Well, okay, maybe once, but that barely counted because the target had been asking for it. Vex prided himself on being a professional. He did his research, he planned his approaches, and he always got his target, which was why he'd spent the last 72 Earth hours studying the Morrison family through their windows, like some kind of cosmic stalker with a really good cloaking device. Humans, he'd determined, were embarrassingly easy prey. They were slow, weak, and apparently completely oblivious to obvious signs of surveillance. The adult male spent most of his time staring at glowing rectangles and making frustrated noises. The adult female ran around frantically doing 17 things at once, which was inefficient and suggested poor tactical planning, and the small offspring seemed to spend most of his time talking to himself about space, which was adorable in a pathetic sort of way. Perfect specimen material, really. What Vex hadn't accounted for was the household's 4th resident, who was currently sitting on a windowsill and taking detailed mental notes about Vex's approach patterns, equipment specifications, and what appeared to be a concerning overconfidence problem. At precisely 11:43 p.m., when Vex's scans indicated that both adult humans had entered sleep cycles, he made his move. His stealth suit shimmered as he materialized in the Morrison living room. Right next to a couch that smelled like pizza and small human. Vex was rather pleased with himself. Silent entry, check. No alarms triggered, check. Sleeping humans still sleeping, check. This was going to be almost too easy. He crept up the stairs with the grace of a predator who had done this sort of thing many, many times before. His target was in the second room on the right, sleeping peacefully under a blanket covered in cartoon spaceships. The irony was not lost on Vex, though he didn't have much of a sense of humor about these things. What Vex didn't notice as he eased open Tommy's bedroom door was the orange tabby cat that had been following him since the moment he'd set foot in the house. Mr. Whiskers moved with the kind of silent precision that would have made ninjas weep with envy, positioning himself in the hallway with a clear line of sight to the bedroom. "Target acquired," Vex whispered into his communication device as he approached Tommy's bed. "Initiating specimen collection in 3, 2... "Cool," Tommy said, sitting up in bed and rubbing his eyes. "Are you finally here to take me on a space adventure?" Vex froze. This was not how specimen collection was supposed to go. The small human was supposed to remain unconscious during the procedure. He was definitely not supposed to be awake and enthusiastic about the whole thing. "You are not supposed to be conscious, small Earth creature," Vex said, which probably wasn't the most reassuring thing to say to an 8-year-old boy, but Vex had never been great with people skills. "I've been waiting for you guys forever," Tommy said, scrambling out of bed. "I knew you were coming. I could totally sense your spacecraft earlier. Is it invisible? Can I see it? Do you have laser guns?" Vex stared at the small human, who seemed to be treating his impending abduction like Christmas morning and a trip to Disneyland rolled into one. This was, without question, the strangest specimen collection he'd ever attempted. "You will come with me now," Vex said, reaching for Tommy with one clawed hand. "Resistance is futile." "Awesome," Tommy said. That was when Mr. Whiskers decided he'd heard quite enough. The cat appeared in the doorway like a furry orange missile, but instead of the usual hissing and arching that Vex might have expected from a frightened household pet, Mr. Whiskers just sat down and looked at him with the sort of expression that suggested Vex had just made a very, very serious mistake. Vex glanced at the cat dismissively. "Insignificant earth fauna," he muttered, turning back to Tommy. Mr. Whiskers' eyes began to glow. Not the reflective shine that cat eyes sometimes get in the dark. Actually glow, like tiny green suns. "Oh," said Vex. "Oh boy," said Tommy. "Oh shit," said Mr. Whiskers, though it came out as more of a low, rumbling growl that seemed to make the entire house vibrate. What happened next violated several laws of physics, at least 3 interstellar treaties, and definitely the Morrison family's pet insurance policy. Mr. Whiskers didn't leap, pounce, or do any of the things that normal cats do when they're annoyed. Instead, he seemed to simply appear next to Vex, as if teleportation was just another Tuesday night activity, like taking out the trash or checking that the doors were locked. Vex, to his credit, had excellent reflexes. He spun around and fired his stun ray at what he still mistakenly believed was just an overgrown Earth feline. The energy blast hit Mr. Whiskers square in the chest, which should have dropped him like a sack of potatoes. Instead, Mr. Whiskers caught the energy beam in his mouth, chewed it thoughtfully for a moment, and then spat it back at Vex with about 10 times the force. "That's my cat," Tommy whispered, like he was watching the best superhero movie ever made, which, in fairness, he basically was. Vex went flying across the room and crashed into Tommy's Star Wars poster, which was both thematically appropriate and probably going to require explaining to the parents later. He scrambled to his feet, his professional confidence now completely replaced by the sort of panic that comes from realizing you've brought a knife to a gunfight, except the knife was actually a high-tech energy weapon, and the gunfight was actually a cosmic horror show starring a house cat. "What are you?" Vex demanded, pulling out what looked like a small silver rod that probably did something very unpleasant to people. Mr. Whiskers tilted his head in that way cats do when they're considering whether something is worth their time. Then he opened his mouth and said in perfectly clear English, "I'm the thing your species tells scary stories about around the campfire." Tommy's eyes went wide. "Mr. Whiskers, you can talk." "I've always been able to talk, kiddo. I just never had anything particularly important to say until now." Vex pressed a button on his silver rod, and it extended into something that looked like a cross between a lightsaber and a bug zapper. He swung it at the cat with the sort of desperate energy that suggested he was starting to understand exactly how much trouble he was in. Mr. Whiskers caught the weapon with one paw, examined it for a moment, and then crushed it like it was made of aluminum foil. Expensive, high-tech, probably to years to develop aluminum foil. You know, the cat said conversationally as Vex scrambled for another weapon, I was having such a nice retirement. Sleeping 18 hours a day, knocking things off tables, judging the family's life choices from a distance. It was peaceful. Vex pulled out what appeared to be a small grenade and armed it with shaking hands. But then you had to go and threaten my boy, Mr. Whiskers continued, and his voice dropped about 3 octaves into something that sounded like it came from the bottom of a very deep, very angry well. And that, my pointy-eared friend, was a mistake. The grenade never made it out of Vex's hand. Mr. Whiskers moved faster than the eye could follow, and suddenly Vex was hanging upside down from the ceiling fan, wrapped in what appeared to be his own equipment cables, spinning slowly in circles while making small, whimpering noises. Are you okay, Mr. Whiskers? Tommy asked, looking concerned. That alien had some pretty scary weapons. Please, Mr. Whiskers said, sitting down and beginning to groom his paw like nothing had happened. I've seen scarier things in your mother's vegetable drawer. That cucumber's been growing fur for 3 weeks. That was when Vex's communication device, which was now embedded halfway through Tommy's desk, started making urgent beeping noises. Commander Vex, report status, came a voice that sounded like gravel being ground in a blender. Are you encountering resistance? Mr. Whiskers looked at the device, then at Vex, then at Tommy. Tommy, he said calmly, you might want to go wake up your parents. Is everything okay? Oh, everything's fine, Mr. Whiskers said, and his eyes started glowing again, brighter this time. It's just that your friend here called for backup. The communication device crackled again. Commander, we're detecting multiple energy signatures from your location. We're sending reinforcements. Mr. Whiskers stretched lazily and cracked his neck in a way that sounded like small bones breaking. Good, he purred. I was just getting warmed up. Tommy had seen a lot of weird things in his 8 years of life. He'd seen his dad try to assemble IKEA furniture while using words that weren't supposed to exist. He'd seen his mom open 17 different containers looking for leftovers that had achieved sentience. But he had never, not once, seen 3 alien spacecraft materialize on his front lawn while his cat glowed like a furry green nightlight. Wow, Tommy said, pressing his face against his bedroom window. Those ships look exactly like the ones in Galaxy Defenders Episode 47. That's because the show's creator was a Regellian who was really bad at keeping secrets, Mr. Whiskers said absently, still grooming his paw like interdimensional warfare was just another Tuesday night inconvenience. The lead ship was bigger than the others, and it landed with the sort of dramatic flair that suggested its pilot had watched way too many action movies. A ramp extended, fog machines started working overtime, and dramatic lighting effects began sweeping across the Morrisons' carefully maintained lawn. Oh, for crying out loud, Mr. Whiskers muttered. These Zephyrians and their theatrical entrances. What's next, battle music? As if summoned by his sarcasm, ominous orchestral music began playing from the ship's external speakers. I really walked into that one, the cat sighed. Captain Zorb emerged from the lead ship with all the confidence of someone who had never encountered anything that his advanced weaponry couldn't handle. He was taller than Vex, with more elaborate armor and what appeared to be a cape, because apparently even alien military commanders had watched too much superhero content. Behind him came 6 more Zephyrian soldiers, each armed with enough firepower to level a small building. They moved in perfect formation across the lawn, stepping around Lisa's prize-winning roses with the sort of professional courtesy that suggested they'd done this sort of thing before. Commander Vex, Zorb called out, his voice amplified by some kind of external speaker system. Report your status immediately. From inside Tommy's bedroom came a muffled whimpering sound and the gentle creaking of a ceiling fan that was never designed to support the weight of a dejected alien commander. I think he's a little tied up right now, Tommy called down helpfully. Zorb looked up at Tommy's window, then at his tactical scanner, then at his squad of heavily armed soldiers. His expression went through several rapid changes, starting with mild confusion and ending with something that looked suspiciously like recognition. Oh, Zorb said, and his voice suddenly sounded much smaller. Oh, no. No, no, no. What is it, Captain? One of his soldiers asked. Zorb was staring at his scanner like it had just told him his extended warranty was expired. Energy signature analysis complete, he said slowly. We have a positive identification on the defending entity. He paused, and Tommy could swear he heard the alien swallow nervously. It's a guardian. The effect on the Zephyrian soldiers was immediate and dramatic. Two of them actually dropped their weapons. One made a sound that might have been a prayer in his native language. Another started backing slowly toward the ship while making what appeared to be religious gestures. "What's a guardian?" Tommy asked, looking down at Mr. Whiskers, who had stopped grooming and was now watching the aliens with the sort of casual interest that cats usually reserved for particularly slow-moving mice. "Oh, you know," Mr. Whiskers said, stretching lazily. "Interdimensional peacekeeping force, elite cosmic law enforcement, protectors of the innocent, bane of evil empires across 17 different galaxies, that sort of thing." Tommy blinked. "You're a space cop?" "Was a space cop. I'm retired. I put in my 2,000 years, got my pension, and decided to spend my golden years sleeping on warm laundry and knocking things off tables. It was a good plan." Down on the lawn, Captain Zorb was having what appeared to be a very urgent conversation with his remaining soldiers, most of which involved pointing at the house and making increasingly frantic gestures. "Sir," one of them said, loudly enough for everyone to hear, "standard protocol for Guardian encounters is immediate withdrawal and a formal apology filed through the Intergalactic Relations Bureau." "I know what the protocol is," Zorb snapped, "but we can't just leave Vex." "Excellent way. Actually," Mr. Whiskers called down from the window, "you absolutely can. In fact, I'd recommend it. Consider it a learning experience for him." That was when the front door of the Morrison house burst open, and Jake and Lisa came stumbling out in their pajamas, looking like they'd been woken up by either a natural disaster or their son's bedroom being invaded by aliens. Which technically was pretty accurate on both counts. Jake was carrying a baseball bat that he'd grabbed from the hall closet. Lisa was wielding a kitchen knife that she'd apparently snatched from the counter on her way through. They looked like the sort of people who had just discovered that their quiet suburban life had suddenly become a lot more complicated. "Okay," Jake said, looking at the armed aliens on his lawn, then up at his son's window, then at his wife, then back at the aliens. "I'm going to need someone to explain what's happening here, and I'm going to need them to explain it very slowly, using small words." "Aliens tried to kidnap Tommy," Lisa said, in the sort of calm, deadly voice that mothers use when someone has threatened their child. "And apparently our cat is some kind of intergalactic superhero." "Well," Jake said, adjusting his grip on the baseball bat, "that explains why he never seemed impressed by anything we did." What happened next would later be described by the Zephyrian Empire's official incident report as a catastrophic failure of intelligence gathering, combined with a fundamental misunderstanding of human protective instincts and their symbiotic relationship with retired cosmic enforcement entities. What Tommy would later describe to his friends at school as the most awesome thing that ever happened in the history of everything. And what Jake would describe to his insurance company as an act of God, possibly several gods, and definitely one very angry cat. It started when Captain Zorb made the tactical error of pointing one of his energy weapons in Tommy's general direction, while trying to establish what he probably thought was a dominant negotiating position. Lisa Morrison had been a kindergarten teacher for 12 years. She had dealt with finger painters hopped up on juice boxes, playground politics that would make the United Nations weep, and at least 17 different craft projects involving glitter that had somehow achieved sentience. She was not impressed by alien weaponry. "Oh, hell no," Lisa said, and launched herself at the nearest Zephyrian with a kitchen knife, and the sort of righteous fury that had once made a substitute teacher quit mid-sentence and never return. Jake, meanwhile, had played baseball in college and still held the record for most aggressive slide into second base. He took one look at his wife charging into battle against armed extraterrestrials and decided that 23 years of marriage had taught him exactly one important lesson. When Lisa went to war, you backed her up and asked questions later. "Honey, duck," he called, winding up like he was trying to hit a home run in the bottom of the ninth. Lisa dropped into a perfect slide just as Jake's Louisville Slugger connected with a Zephyrian energy rifle, sending it spinning end over end into Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning petunias next door. "Sorry about the flowers," Jake called to his neighbor's house, then turned back to the alien invasion currently happening on his front lawn. "We'll buy you new ones." Mr. Whiskers, meanwhile, was watching this display of human protective instincts with what could only be described as professional pride. "That's my family," he said to Tommy, who was still pressed against the bedroom window like he was watching the best nature documentary ever made. "Are Mom and Dad going to be okay?" Tommy asked, watching his mother systematically disarm an alien soldier who was approximately twice her size, using what appeared to be advanced kindergarten crowd control techniques. "Kid," Mr. Whiskers said, his eyes beginning to glow brighter, "your parents are about to learn something that most of the galaxy figured out a long time ago. You don't mess with humans when they're protecting their young. And you definitely don't mess with humans when they've got backup. The cat dropped from the windowsill and seemed to simply dissolve into shadow, reappearing a moment later in the middle of the front lawn like some kind of furry orange ninja. Captain Zorb turned his weapon toward Mr. Whiskers, which was his second major tactical error of the evening. The first had been pointing it at Tommy. The third was about to be firing it. The energy beam that erupted from Zorb's rifle was the kind of concentrated destruction that could punch through starship hulls. It hit Mr. Whiskers directly in the chest, and for a moment, the entire neighborhood was lit up like the 4th of July. When the light faded, Mr. Whiskers was still sitting exactly where he'd been, looking mildly annoyed and slightly singed around the edges. He said, "Was rude." What happened next was less of a fight and more of a physics demonstration titled, "Why You Should Always Read the Fine Print on Interdimensional Peace Treaties." Mr. Whiskers moved like liquid lightning, appearing behind one soldier to delicately remove his weapon, then materializing next to another to politely suggest, via superior firepower, that he might want to reconsider his life choices. He coordinated with Jake and Lisa like they'd been a tactical unit for years, creating openings for them to advance while systematically dismantling the aliens' technological advantages. Lisa found herself facing off against a Zephyrian who was at least 7 feet tall and armed with what looked like a miniature cannon. She looked at her kitchen knife, looked at the alien, and then looked at Mr. Whiskers. "A little help here?" she called. "Use the sprinkler system," Mr. Whiskers suggested, casually deflecting an energy blast with his tail. "These guys' equipment doesn't like water." Lisa grinned and kicked the sprinkler control box that Jake had installed last summer. Water erupted across the lawn, and immediately every piece of Zephyrian technology started sparking and making distressed beeping sounds. "Waterproofing technology," Jake observed, swinging his bat at a now powerless energy rifle, apparently not a priority in alien weapons development. Captain Zorb, watching his elite squad being systematically defeated by a suburban family and their pet cat, made his final tactical error of the evening. He activated his personal shield generator and called for emergency extraction. "This is Captain Zorb," he shouted into his communicator. "Request immediate tactical withdrawal. Situation is completely foobar. Repeat, situation is completely foobar." "Did that alien just use military slang?" Jake asked, pausing in his systematic destruction of alien weaponry. "Language is a living thing," Mr. Whiskers said, appearing next to Zorba's shield bubble and examining it with professional interest. "It travels. Although I have to say, his pronunciation needs work." The shield bubble, which was designed to withstand concentrated plasma fire and small nuclear explosions, lasted exactly 3 seconds against whatever Mr. Whiskers did to it. Tommy couldn't see exactly what happened, but it looked like the cat simply reached out and turned off the universe's most expensive nightlight. Zorb stood there, weaponless, shieldless, and facing down a family of humans who had just spent the last 15 minutes learning that they were apparently much better at combat than they'd ever suspected. "So," Lisa said, still holding her kitchen knife and breathing slightly heavily, "anyone want to explain why you tried to kidnap my son? And why you thought that was going to end well for you?" Jake added, leaning on his baseball bat like it was a walking stick. From the bedroom window, Tommy's voice drifted down. "This is the best Tuesday ever." Mr. Whiskers sat down in the middle of the lawn, surrounded by the scattered remains of advanced alien technology, and began grooming his paw again. "Honestly," he said, "I tried to warn them. The aftermath of the great Morrison family alien invasion, as it would forever be known in Tommy's journal, looked like a cross between a yard sale and a very expensive fireworks display. Pieces of what had once been cutting-edge Zephyrian military technology were scattered across the lawn like the world's most dangerous confetti, still occasionally sparking and making electronic dying noises. Captain Zorb stood in the middle of it all, looking like a man who had just realized that his comprehensive military training had somehow failed to include a section on what to do when defeated by a suburban family and their cosmic cat. "So," Jake said, still holding his baseball bat but now leaning on it in a more conversational way, "I'm guessing this isn't how these things usually go for you." Zorb looked at Jake, then at Lisa, who was examining her kitchen knife for damage, then at Mr. Whiskers, who had finished grooming his paw and was now sitting like a furry orange statue of judgment. "In my 47 years of military service," Zorb said slowly, "I have conquered 17 different worlds, subjugated 43 different species, and personally defeated 3 separate rebellion movements." "That's nice, dear," Lisa said in the tone she usually reserved for Tommy when he was explaining the complex political structure of his imaginary superhero universe. "Would you like some cookies?" The question seemed to break something fundamental in Zorb's worldview. "You? You're offering me baked goods? Well, it's almost midnight, you've had a long day, and you're probably hungry, Lisa said, because even interdimensional warfare couldn't override 23 years of ingrained hospitality. I made chocolate chip earlier. Tommy chose that moment to come barreling out of the house in his pajamas, moving with the sort of excited energy that suggested he'd just witnessed the best thing that had ever happened in the history of everything. That was amazing, he said, launching into what appeared to be a detailed play-by-play analysis of the evening's events. And when Mom did that sliding thing, and Dad hit that guy's gun with the bat, and Mr. Whiskers caught that laser beam and ate it, and then the sprinklers came on, and everything started exploding, and... Breathe, kiddo, Mr. Whiskers said, appearing next to Tommy with the sort of casual teleportation that the family was apparently going to have to get used to. You'll hyperventilate. Mr. Whiskers, Tommy said, grabbing the cat and hugging him with the enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered that his pet was basically a superhero. You're the coolest cat in the entire universe. I know, Mr. Whiskers said, but his purr suggested he was pleased by the recognition. Captain Zorb watched this family reunion with the expression of someone trying to process information that didn't fit into any of his existing categories. You're not going to execute us. Execute you? Jake said, looking genuinely puzzled. Why would we execute you? You're defeated, you're disarmed, and you look like you've learned your lesson. Besides, Lisa added, you haven't actually hurt anyone, you've mostly just made a mess of the lawn and scared the neighbors. From next door came the sound of Mrs. Henderson's window slamming shut, followed by what sounded like several deadbolts being engaged. Okay, you've really scared the neighbors, Lisa corrected. Mr. Whiskers looked at the defeated Zephyrians with what might have been sympathy, if cats were capable of such things. Look, he said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to your ships. You're going to file a report that says this entire solar system is under Guardian protection, and you're going to spread the word that the Morrison family is off limits to all hostile extraterrestrial activity. And in return, Zorb asked cautiously, in return, you get to leave with all your limbs attached and a story that'll make you famous in every cantina from here to the Andromeda Galaxy. Zorb considered this. The story of the human family that defeated a Zephyrian strike team with a baseball bat and garden sprinklers? Don't forget the kitchen knife, Lisa added helpfully. And the retired guardian who came out of retirement to protect his adopted family, Tommy said, still hugging Mr. Whiskers like he was afraid the cat might disappear. Zact, said Zorb, is actually a pretty good story. 20 minutes later, the Morrison family stood on their front lawn, watching 3 Zephyrian spacecraft lift off into the night sky. The ship's running lights blinked once in what might have been a farewell salute before disappearing into the darkness. So, Jake said, putting his arm around Lisa's shoulders, that happened. It happened, Lisa agreed, leaning into him. Our cat is apparently a space cop, our son has been vindicated in his belief in alien life, and we just fought off an alien invasion using sporting goods and kitchen utensils. Don't forget the sprinkler system, Tommy added. That was tactical genius. Thanks, kiddo, Jake said, ruffling his son's hair. I learned that from watching your mom handle the PTA bake sale disputes. Mr. Whiskers, who had been sitting quietly during this family moment, stretched and yawned in the way that cats do when they're preparing to find a comfortable spot for a nap. So, Mr. Whiskers, Tommy said, what happens now? Are you going back to space cop work? Nah, the cat said, padding toward the front door. I told you, I'm retired. I've got a nice family, a comfortable house, and a food bowl that gets filled twice a day whether I deserve it or not. Plus, someone needs to keep an eye on you people. Tonight proved you're trouble magnets. We're trouble magnets? Lisa asked, following the cat toward the house. Tommy's been broadcasting his desire to meet aliens to anyone with a radio telescope for years, Mr. Whiskers said. You think tonight was a coincidence? Tommy looked sheepish. So this is kind of my fault? This, Mr. Whiskers said, settling down on his favorite spot on the couch, was inevitable. But that's okay. It turned out better than expected. 3 weeks later, Tommy Morrison became the most popular kid in 3rd grade when he brought in a show-and-tell presentation titled My Summer Vacation, the night my cat saved Earth from alien invasion. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, gave him an A+ for creativity and a gentle suggestion that maybe he should consider writing fiction when he grew up. Jake Morrison became something of a neighborhood legend after word got out that he'd fought off aliens with a baseball bat. The story grew in the telling until he'd single-handedly defeated an entire armada using nothing but superior American sporting equipment. Lisa Morrison started carrying her favorite kitchen knife in her purse, just in case. The PTA meetings became notably more civil after that. and Mr. Whiskers went back to his retirement routine of sleeping 18 hours a day, knocking things off tables, and judging the family's life choices from a comfortable distance. The only difference was that his food bowl now read Galactic Guardian Chow, and Tommy had convinced his parents to upgrade from generic cat food to the premium stuff. After all, cosmic protectors deserved the best. The Morrison house was quietly added to 17 different intergalactic databases as a location to be avoided at all costs, filed under hostile entities, extreme caution required. The entry included a note that read, Family unit displays unprecedented combat effectiveness when threatened. Guardian-class entity on premises. Bring cookies if diplomatic contact is absolutely necessary. And on quiet Tuesday nights, when the house was peaceful and the family was settled in for the evening, Mr. Whiskers would sometimes catch Tommy staring out the window with his plastic telescope, still watching the skies. Looking for more aliens, the cat would ask. Nah, Tommy would say. Just making sure they know we're ready if they come back. Mr. Whiskers would purr, a sound that no longer seemed quite so innocent, and settle down for another well-deserved nap. After all, being a cosmic guardian was exhausting work even in retirement. Especially when your family was made up of trouble magnets who fought alien invasions with kitchen utensils and had absolutely no sense of self-preservation whatsoever. But that, Mr. Whiskers reflected, was what made them worth protecting.